Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th ever episode of Internally Screening. I can't believe that we've actually been doing this for about a year.
I know.
That is crazy. And we didn't get 12. We didn't quite get the 12.
No.
I blame Christmas entirely, to be honest. I think that's when we lost some ground, but you know what?
Yeah, maybe.
It is what it is. Jesus was born. What were we supposed to do? I mean, it's pretty rude of him to just be born during such a crucial period for our podcast, but it is what it is. I'm Rupert.
I'm Adam.
And we're going to be reviewing two very good films today. It's going to be a positive one for the most part. Apart from probably this part. So we're not going to go too much into these, but we watched some films today. We've watched some films recently and figured it would be nice to go over them. The only real stuff I've personally watched. No, you know what? I'm being rude. Adam, what did you watch?
Okay, so this week, the last couple of weeks, in fact, my mum was absolutely adamant that I had to watch the 2020 film Eurovision Song Contest: The Story of the Fire Saga, and I, understandably was not particularly keen on doing so. But then she gave me an ultimatum, and that was, if I watch this one film, she will watch all three Star Wars prequels. And to clarify, she is a big Star Wars fan, but kind of very recently become one. She likes the original trilogy, but she is what I would call a sequel apologist. And
this just sounds like mutual sadism.
Well, kind of, but I wanted to
if I can inflict this film upon you,
I have to do to be honest,
I don't know why the prequels.
I don't know why she took the deal that she had to watch three films.
That's a bad trade because they're all 2.5 hours as well.
I was like, Mum, I'm happy to watch three films that you want me to watch. I'm willing to do that for you. Like, she wanted to get me to watch Pride and Prejudice and Zombies at one point, and I was like, we can watch that. She was like, she stuck to her own rules, which is, I don't know, just way too charitable of her. So as of right now,
I mean, I did hear quite good things about that Eurovision film. I mean, I not from filmy people, but from people who just kind of chuck something on Netflix. I mean, I'm not going to watch it because normal Eurovision is unbearable enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really my scene at all. I kind of respect the pomp and circumstance of it, the campiness, it's very outrageous, and it's fun, it's frivolous, but it does not appeal to me, mostly on a musical level, really, because a lot of it is just quite bad. And I mean, when it comes down to this film, I mean, it's a modern Will Ferrell film, and he has such a bad track record. I mean, I would say in general he has a bad track record. Like, you could probably count the number of really truly good Will Ferrell films on one hand, but they've just been good enough to propel him to the upper echelon of comedians or comedy actors. So my mini review of Eurovision was heartwarming. I think I got a lot more out of it because I was watching it with my mum, and she enjoyed it, and she was looking over to me to make sure I was still enjoying it, and I chuckled a couple of times. It was kind of funny. So the whole thing is they're from Iceland, and it's I
remember the real thing. Yeah,
they're desperate to try and break into it. There's the songs in it are super trashy. The direction of it, the cinematography, is just TV movie level. It opens up with I think legitimately Calibri font for
oh, wow.
We're in Iceland. I'm come on, you're putting absolutely no effort.
I think we need a new genre, and that genre is Netflix cool, because that's what it is.
Cool. It's this slight. It's higher budget than a Lifetime movie would be, but it's still very much I'm amazed of all the people that were attached to it. There were cameos from Demi Lovato, Pierce Brosnan was in it,
wow. Cool.
Doing a hilarious Icelandic accent. He sounded what hurdy-gurdy that.
He's not good at accents, man.
No.
He's not good at accents. You can just about do the English accent.
You can do an English accent. That's about it, yeah. It has Dan Stevens. Do you know him? The guy who played the Beast.
Yeah, Dan Stevens. He's a good actor.
Yeah, he played
was great
like
in Apostle.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he played like a gay Russian in it, and he was probably my favorite part of the film. Actually, he was like just going for it so ridiculously. I don't really know what I would give a film like this. It was really hard because all of my objectivity went out the window because I was like sharing an experience with my mum. I was trying to switch my critical brain off as much as possible, and it was like it kept coming in to be like, that's really bad, you should point that out. And I was like, no, if I point that out, my mum will hate me, like so
if I point out the blocking in this shot, I'm gonna seem like a nerd.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. I don't really recommend it unless you're actively looking for something really camp and silly to enjoy as like mindless watching, but it was pretty mindless. So yeah, that's that. But conversely, my mum now has watched Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. We've still yet to see Revenge of the Sith. My mum was so perplexed and aggravated by Phantom Menace in particular that she gave it a 6 out of 10. Now on the mother's rating scale, that is like a 1. Terrible, that is a 1 out of 10. My mum's like, I'm not really sure I like that film. 8 out of 10. Bang. So, yeah.
That's a shocker.
And my dad tried to watch the first half of Phantom Menace, and his blood was boiling. He was so completely enraged by it. He was like, this makes no sense. Why are they still racing?
What? I don't know if there's ever even a point of us doing... Like, the prequels are, like, maybe the most discussed films of, like... At least our friendship circle.
Yeah,
just
maybe we'll get around to it. It could
maybe
be
one day if we can get like an original take, we could maybe. Do
I think it could be fun to have like a bunch of us doing it, because so far when we've done reactions or reactions yet to come out, perhaps it's normally been just 3 of us. Maybe we had 4 or 5 just absolutely losing our minds at it. It could be a laugh. Like it'd be chaos, but everything that has been, like you say, everything that could be said about those films has been said, so chaos would probably be the only fun way of spicing up a reaction or a review. So Rupert, what have you watched recently? What have you come across?
The only real new film I watched was In the Heights, which I watched on a very hot day just because it seemed appropriate. I wasn't a big fan of Hamilton. In the Heights, for anyone not in the know, is just a Lin-Manuel Miranda stage adaptation film.
Right.
It's been very hyped. It's been very, very well reviewed, much like Hamilton. But unlike Hamilton, this is a proper film adaptation, and everyone was loving it. And it does kind of seem like the perfect film to come out after a lockdown. It's very joyful, it's very sentimental, very it's just very full of life. It's got a very progressive message about gentrification and people in New York, particularly the people from like the Dominican Republic and that community. It's got a lot to say about that stuff. I don't think I am a person calibrated to enjoy Lin-Manuel Miranda's stuff. I can, as with Hamilton, I watched it and completely appreciate all of the talent that goes into it. There's no doubt that what he's achieved is like absolutely astonishing, and the amount of stuff he can do is just insane. It's not a film for me. It's so sappy. It's so sentimental.
Right. Okay.
There's like really no edge to it whatsoever. It's like maybe the most sugary thing. It has even the emotional lows in it. Really, I have actually heard. I was looking through reviews of it. I have actually heard from people who really, really love the stage play that there was some very bizarre changes to the storyline, which seems. This is interesting to me. It almost makes me want to look up what they changed that so many fans are super annoyed at. But apparently there's some really, really bizarre changes that kind of undermine the story. Either way, it's not for me. I don't even think that the music was nowhere near as good as the music in Hamilton. There are a good few real catchy bangers in Hamilton, and this one has all the glitz and the glamour, very flashily directed. It's not my thing. it's too long as well. The film just kind of peters out at the end.
How long is it?
It's like 2 hours and a bit. I don't think it's full like 2.5 or anything, but I think it's 2 hours and a bit. I'm not looking it up because I can't be bothered, but yeah, I think it's around, and it felt that way because there's like a whole end section of the film that just like feels like it keeps going, man. I think a lot of people. I'm not going to say like I don't recommend it because I think a lot of people like it, but for me it was like a 4 out of 10. It's so like unabashedly wholesome. It's kind of sickening to me.
Sickeningly wholesome.
Like I mean, look,
in a two word snippet, if they had to give you the blurb, the only review they had.
Yeah, sickeningly wholesome. And I mean, we're about to talk about 2 films, and I think we're going to be pretty positive on them. So you can probably get a gauge as to why In the Heights is not really for me. If you like singing and dancing, and pretty good music and a storyline that is it's just very cringy to me. I'm too cynical and self-important. I just couldn't get into it. But what is one of the films we're going to talk about today, Adam?
Right, well, yeah, the first film we're going to talk about is the recent Oscar winner. Yes, we're still on the Oscar films because we're that behind and I don't give a fuck. Is The Father, starring Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Coleman. A directorial debut from one Florian Zeller. From my understanding, it's an adaptation of a play. The 2012 play La Pierre, which is The Father in French.
He's a French guy, yeah.
He is a Frenchman, yes. And so basically, the kind of long and short of it is that Anthony Hopkins is Olivia Colman's father, and we believe, to begin with, is, suffering from dementia or perhaps is on the way there, and, she's having to look after him. It's... To give too much detail about any of the film really is to spoil it, so I'll try and hold off for a little bit, but it probably won't be possible for the whole thing.
We're going to have to have a pretty clear spoiler divide in this, I think.
Because the way the story is structured is so inherently, I guess, it takes you on this interesting journey, and to begin with, you're not necessarily sure what version of reality is kind of true, and it becomes more and more clear as the film continues what is happening, and it becomes more and more tragic as it goes on, as the characters kind of come to terms with the emotional weight of the things they're experiencing, to be as vague as possible. I guess first and foremost we have to talk about Anthony Hopkins, who won the Oscar for Best Actor for this film, which was contentious because obviously a lot of people wanted Chadwick Boseman to win, posthumously, in the sort of tragedy in the wake of his death. But given that the Oscars didn't do that, I can totally understand why this film, just based on pure performance, did. Rupert, what did you think of this film and Anthony Hopkins in particular?
Yeah, I guess we could talk about performances, and that won't really give any spoilers in the film. So and it's a bit of a sort of bottle film in a way. So as you kind of expect from a sort of stage play adaptation, and I mean, it's probably the key part of this and the way it's kind of structured are probably the performances and the way it's structured are the two absolute selling points and strengths of the film that kind of are excellent. Obviously, Anthony Hopkins is just amazing. I think it was completely deserved. I haven't seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, so I can't comment on.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't either.
All I'll say on that is that Chadwick Boseman is going to leave an amazing legacy, and I don't think the Oscars going to really add much to it. So I don't think it really matters.
I think in some way getting an Oscar just because you passed on is almost kind of it's kind of like a participation trophy. It doesn't feel genuine. That might offend some people, but like you say, his legacy is way more powerful than any fucking award could ever be. So
I mean, everybody knows that Oscars are worthless anyway. So
exactly.
It's a fucking stupid ceremony. So Anthony Hopkins absolutely kills it in this. He's really fun to watch and really believable characters. What I liked about him particularly, you can tell he was really in tune with the script. I saw an interview with Florian. Is it Zeller? Sorry.
Yeah, Zeller.
Zeller. Yeah, I saw a good interview with him where they were talking about. Obviously, he's French, so adapting this into his play into English was a bit of a challenge. And Anthony Hopkins was talking to him about how, he would say, well, instead of this line where I say this, if I just tweak this, it seems much more English, because the film is very, very English.
Yes, extraordinarily so.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that really, really shone through, because clearly this guy really knows how to work with actors, and I think he got the absolute best out of everyone. Because there are some characters here who I think could have been like really annoying or like overly cheesy and predictable, and actually end up being much more interesting. Obviously, the way it's structured really adds that. I can't really say anything more than that. But Anthony Hopkins absolutely nails his kind of this whole element of dementia, where you have these kind of mood swings, where you're sort of in and out of remembering things, but especially in the earlier stages where you're sort of suspicious.
Yeah.
And everyone's treating you weird. He really nails that element of being able to be completely charming and then flip a switch and become completely rude and shut off and telling people to fuck off and all of this. And I think he absolutely nails that. But he really does. He really sinks into that role. And my girl Olivia Coleman absolutely smashes it. Absolutely smashes it. I actually knew I knew this film was coming out years ago because it was on her IMDb thing, and I'm really glad because I saw the title of it. I was like, "Oh, The Father." That sounds probably serious. Yeah. And I've been looking forward to it since then. So it goes without saying, she doesn't get that much screen time, but she really makes the most of it. She
absolutely
is completely believable. The emotional scenes and all of that, she absolutely smashes. Very, very different performance to say, of the obvious comparison is The Favourite, right? Because that was the other Oscar film that she was in. But this is almost like a more classic Olivia Coleman role. Kind of reminds me of her character in Broadchurch a little bit more. Maybe even like Sophie from Peep Show a little bit more. Obviously, like a very different context, but like her
just very down to earth and kind of motherly, and
she's so believable. The way she can just like I don't ever, even though she's like an actress that I'm absolutely obsessed with and I love her, I can't, when I'm actually watching a film with her in, she completely becomes the character. It sounds so cliche, but you just don't really see Olivia Coleman when she's playing it because she's just so convincing. And I mean, it is perfect casting as well. This is a role that screams for Olivia Coleman. And I thought a lot of the side characters were great as well, like Mark Gatiss, who shows up. He's great.
Yeah, he's wonderful. I forget the name of the dude, but I'm going to refer to him as Evil Jude Law.
Yes, he is great. I've seen him in other stuff. I'm trying to think of what I've seen him
recently. I rewatched A Knight's Tale, and he's the baddie in that.
That's it. He's the Black Prince of Wales or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and he looks like a bang halfway between Jude Law and Joaquin Phoenix.
I just look at him and I think British expat in Spain.
Fair enough.
Immediately, he's got a great tan.
Yeah, and but he literally does look like Jude Law, just with black hair and slightly different.
He does
eyes.
look more evil, for sure.
Yeah, and Imogen Poots as as one of the sort of carers they bring in at one point. I thought
she was good as well.
I mean, again, small role, but I just thought basically every little role they had to fill, they found the right person for it, and as the film kind of shifts and twists and contorts, they all bring out really interesting layers in all of their characters that kind of confuse the whole piece and make for a really interesting thing to unpick.
Yeah, I think films that go for realism can sometimes have a really difficult time, especially when they're trying to tell an emotional story.
Yeah,
because you're asking a lot of actors to come across as genuine in such an emotionally dramatic film. And it sounds simple, but if you've seen a lot of those kind of Oscar films, it's actually much more difficult than it seems. And this film really, really nails the realism, and that is incredibly impressive to me.
Yeah. Are we able to talk about the cinematography and the direction before spoiling it, or do you reckon...
We might have to cut this conversation in half.
Yes.
Well, I mean, needless to say, the film, it looks great, right?
Yeah.
It's not what I would call like outstanding. The
It's not,
magic
like,
is more in the
flashy.
editing. It's not
Yeah.
flashy, no. It's but yeah, there actually are some great shots in this. I'll say that. It's it never goes for flashy. It's very. It's kind of the way you'd imagine like a stage director to direct a film, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think, like you said earlier, I think you can really tell that this has been translated across just by the way that they've kind of they keep it so tightly knit into this one environment, and then the environment kind of morphs depending upon, you know, what is required of the scene. Again, we're kind of dancing dangerously close to spoilers. All I will say is that I think you're right, as you just mentioned, that I think the real magic of it is in the editing, as you said. You know, some of the cuts they do from like one, say, like room to another that kind of transforms your understanding of what the characters are experiencing is really, really clever. And, you know, it's perhaps, you know, in other films could be like a bit tropey, like trying to kind of like, oh, we fooled the audience into this thing. But this film handles it with a level of class and sophistication that I think really elevates that. And I never once thought like, oh, that was a cheap choice to do, where I think another film may have done it in a cheaper way. But,
so should we just say spoilers from this point on?
Spoilers from here on out. If you haven't watched this film and you're interested in a drama about a family drama that's quite different, it's got quite like a specific voice to it, with some amazing performances, Oscar-winning from Hopkins. Please go and watch it.
Oscar-nominated to Olivia Coleman as well.
And Oscar-nominated, of course. So, Rupert, let's crack into some spoilers, shall we?
So, it doesn't really take you long to figure out exactly what's going on. The film kind of plays its hand early on, so it's pretty clear basically what starts happening. This was actually in the trailer, so it's not even really a spoiler, but it's probably better to go in. The trailer probably did tell you a little bit too much by showing its hand, but the film does actually show its hand very early. Very early on, for example, Olivia Coleman, she talks about going to Paris to live with her husband, and later on, she says, I never said that, what's going on? I never mentioned that. And she gets switched with a different actress quite early on. And Anthony Hopkins doesn't recognise her, obviously sort of playing into the dementia element of it. And then her sort of absolute dickhead husband, he's switching between different, between Mark Gatiss and Evil Jude Law quite often in the film. And yeah, it's really good. And I thought initially, like, is this gonna ever mean anything? Like, it's an interesting choice to sort of disorient the viewer. And actually, the way it ties it in is pretty obvious, but completely sort of satisfying as a narrative finish, I think.
Yeah. Agreed. I was thinking, so early on, we have like a very sort of ordinary introduction. Olivia Coleman, the daughter, goes and visits Anthony Hopkins. Tells her about her life. It's like, we need to get you a carer because I can't be here for you anymore. I'm going to Paris. It's a nice enough scene, a calm and quiet sort of opening and scene setting, and then it immediately kind of goes into this other scene where there's like a man in his house he doesn't recognize, and the woman who says she's Anne, his daughter, is played by a totally different actress. And in that moment, because I hadn't seen any trailers and stuff, I was kind of questioning, all right, what angle is this film going to take? Is it going to take the dementia angle, which it obviously did take, or is it going to go with a kind of, they think he's nuts, but actually, these are people swindling somewhat like an older person out of something, which would have been a little, I guess.
I'm glad they didn't go for that.
Less tactful, but I don't think it could have. I don't think that would necessarily have been. Like, there could have been like a sinister thing. It would have to be a
totally different tone, though, right?
Like, I'm not thinking like, oh, I guess, but at that point in the film, there was a kind of level of mystery to it. Is basically what I'm getting at, is that I wasn't 100% on what the film was trying to say to me, and along with Anthony Hopkins' character, I was confused and disoriented, which was clever. I thought the way they framed it made me feel like the character was feeling. And then, as we go on, I guess jumping right to the end, we discover all of it has kind of been remembered retrospectively with all of these characters in this care home that he's actually in, this hospital. So the characters he's jumbling up are the faces of orderlies and nurses, operating in the home.
Yeah.
So I guess, chronologically the film won't necessarily make much sense, but if you think of it as someone trying to remember conversations he's had and like ground himself in some level of reality as to like what his situation is currently, then it kind of makes sense. It's like this is what it's like to kind of live inside the mind of someone suffering with dementia. This is maybe the only time I've seen that experience translated onto the screen, at least in such a, I don't know, direct point of view, like sort of as your main protagonist, and it was heartbreaking, really.
I mean, I think the film, I was like, wow, this is a very well crafted, very well planned out, very sort of perfected piece that obviously he probably had the chance from taking this to stage play to film to add a lot of effect that you can't get in a live setting. And I was just really impressed by that. And then I think really the cherry on top, I mean the final scene in the film is probably one of the most sort of difficult to get through things like emotionally that I've seen in ages, and it's the kind of thing that, again, if this was like a really Oscar-y film, which in a way the film is Oscar-y, but it's like it actually has so much art and purpose to it.
It feels a lot more legitimate and genuine. Like it's
the kind of thing that could come off as showy, but really like just is just completely affecting. It's really, really just heartbreaking is like really the only way to say it. The final shot of the film does end on a nice one shot, which is cool. Very, very beautifully composed, like one shot that leads perfectly. It has like a really I don't even want to really describe it because it kind of it speaks for itself. I don't want to like sort of describe it. I just think it's better experienced, basically. It is like a very like affecting ending, and there's a lot to be said about it. I always love when a film pulls off like a great ending. That like is so crucial to me. And I think the final moment, the final moment with Anthony Hopkins is like that is why he won the Oscar. And I think Olivia Coleman's final moment of the film, where she goes to see him and then she's driving away in the taxi, is equally like pretty brutal, like emotionally to watch. Because it is like a very, very bleak ending. There's like, as sentimental as the film is at points, it really doesn't offer much comfort in a way.
No.
The conclusion is basically like,
this is life now.
It's fucked, that is the ending. And he essentially, I mean, this is real spoilers, essentially his daughter just does not have time for him in his current state in her life for him anymore. And she's going to have to basically live with that for the rest of her life, and he's going to die in like this horribly confused state.
Oh man, when you describe it like that, it really does start affecting me. Like I guess what it does is, I think both of us, I mean, I don't know about you, but speaking for myself, I've been blessed enough not to have experienced a family member suffering with Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia, and this really frames it in such a sincere and powerful way. When I said earlier I've not really seen films attempt this, I think what I mean is I've never seen them try and make it feel real. You always get in thrillers or something like that, horror films and whatever, you get like someone's crazy and they sometimes try and illustrate what it's like from the point of view, but this felt really like grounded in reality.
It really makes you like actually sort of like the it makes you really like think about what it would be like, which sounds very basic, but like it actually really, by forcing your perspective and manipulating you in the very clever way that it does, it like actually achieves that effect in a very strong and powerful way. Absolutely.
It's very methodical in the way it kind of takes you through levels of emotion. I think that's the best way I could describe its structure. That it's kind of, you go through the, I guess in a similar way to, you know, the stages of grief. He's kind of going through the stages of acceptance, right? Like of understanding. I guess he never truly understands his situation, but he kind of does. There's like moments of lucidity, but we start off, his first mood is anger and frustration. He's like, why are you people lying to me? Like, you keep saying one thing, you keep saying the other. Who are these people? I don't know them. Like, get your story straight. Stop treating me like a child. I'm fine. And I guess denial as well in that, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I remember there was like a really great switching point where he has like a lucid, quiet moment. And it's when they do... So the film, structure-wise, ends up being, to, I guess, kind of Memento-esque, really.
In a way,
you kind of have a lot of scenes that repeat themselves, but in different settings or with different characters, or scenes will kind of go in a circular fashion where you think you started at the beginning of a scene, but you actually started at the end, and it works its way back round. And one of the best scenes like that is where they're having a conversation at dinner, Anne and her husband, about what to do with him. And he kind of walks into it, and he's very calm. And it's like the most calm he's been the whole time. So calm that you don't even know if he's really in the room, like if he's really there. And like moments earlier, he says like one of the only nice things he ever says to Anne the whole film, which is, you know, thank you for everything you're doing. You know, thank you for this. And they're talking about, like, the husband is talking about getting rid of him, and then they see him come in. They're like, come and have dinner. We forget all about that. And then the conversation comes back round to that talking point, and then his perspective of it changes, and he goes, oh, fuck this. Like, I'm locking myself in my room, and I don't know how to deal with this. That was just like an amazing moment of clarity, I guess, for the character and for the audience.
I mean, it is a very sort of clever set reveals, and the way that I think it's like, I don't know how you would write something like that and then be able to pace it out in a way that it had, even though you've got sort of the same thing happening and you're sort of going forwards and then backwards, or backwards and then forwards, you're then to pace that, so you have, like, you know, because people talk about film structure, but really, like, you have scene structure as well, and each scene sort of does have its, like, you know, 3 beats, beginning, middle, and end, right? So, like, to paint it like, that's a very ingenious piece of writing.
Oh,
to
absolutely,
have something
absolutely.
that you can do that. That's just that is a great scene. I also I really like the scenes with him, with his with the woman who, at least initially, I mean, I guess you never really know whether he actually had this woman looking after him in his home. The scenes he has with, like, the carer,
with Imogen Poots, the blonde
that's
lady.
the one. Yeah. Those were really great scenes as well, because it's good to see. Because I guess the worry with a film like this is, if you're doing a character who has dementia, you're going to sort of paint them in a sort of one-dimensional way. But the film does a very clever job of kind of showing you what he was like. You know, pre-disease. It's not like really a caricature of someone with dementia. You know, a much lazier film would just be like, okay, his whole thing is he just forgets everything.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And that it would never go much further than that. Where this film is much cleverer, and really does a great job of, you really, like, they all seem, I mean, it's basically just the point I was making about realism earlier, where you know, you get a very solid understanding of what this guy was like. And, you know, if you're like a British person, if you're like a British person, you probably met some old guy exactly like this. I know I have, and, like, it just seems very authentic. I don't know how accurate this is to dementia sufferers. I do know that the whole thing he has about stealing and the obsession he has about like, are people going to steal my watch? Where's my watch?
Yeah.
I know that's like a very sort of classic symptom of dementia.
Yeah.
And
not
that
understanding your own
detail.
forgetfulness and kind of pinning it on others.
Like the suspicion. Yeah, it is very cleverly done.
Yeah.
I mean, this was just a great film. I mean, the only one sort of nagging thing I have about it is one of the most interesting things about the film is Anne and her relationship with her dad. Because it's really implied. You kind of get this sense that there's something going on there. And then there's this sort of, I guess, not really like a side plot, but in the development of their relationship, there's implied to be this thing with her sister, right? And you can guess quite early on that the sister is not around anymore.
Yeah.
And this kind of concludes in a hallucinatory sequence where Anthony Hopkins is walking out of his room, and then he's in a hospital ward, and he goes into the hospital room, and there's a woman sort of hooked up to the machine. And then I forget exactly how it concludes actually.
It just has her going, dad,
right?
And then he wakes up to the calls of dad, like from the other room.
Right, so it's basically like a dream sequence, and
yeah.
I mean, in a way, I'm grateful they didn't completely explain it or something like that. But it did feel a little bit unfinished in terms of, because the whole thing, Anne is clearly sort of like, she does have something sort of against, she obviously loves her dad a lot, but there's kind of like a beef there.
Yeah,
and she's always been like the second favourite. Yeah, and her sister's death obviously would have just sort of cemented that with her being sort of martyred, because he always goes on about how great and talented her sister was. And I don't know, I just feel like there was that never felt quite sort of fully I don't want to say wrapped up, but
I think there are a couple of loose ends, and I guess a film like this, of its very nature, will have those. And I think I too was torn. I was like,
it was just a very dramatic part. The dream sequence was a very dramatic part, and in the end, I don't know how much that scene that has all this dramatic weight to it really adds to the story, you know? Because if you're going to do something like that, it feels like there should then be either something to follow it or more work previously on this particular thing for this reveal to really mean something. But you can kind of figure out what's gone on pretty early on. You know that the sister has died in some kind of accident or unexpectedly. And then the film reveals that she has, and that's kind of the end to it, which just feels a little incomplete to me. I don't know how you'd fix it. It's clearly like a core element of the film, and I don't know that the relationship between Anne and her father would have been as deep as it is, and because it does provide a lot of genuine tension. It has to be in the story. I just don't know what you do to make it feel less incomplete, if that makes sense.
I mean, I don't know if I have the answers, but one thing I thought that scene brought up that I thought was interesting was you don't really get a good look at the woman in the bed, because the daughter that's dying.
Oh, true, yeah.
And she's bruised and covered in cuts and blood and stuff, and she looks similar enough to the Imogen Poots carer character, where I questioned whether they deliberately cast her as both. I couldn't tell.
Well, that's interesting.
I couldn't tell.
On a rewatch, maybe I'll get more from that, yeah.
But I'm wondering if, to me, the dynamic was... He was... because it was kind of unclear who was the carer, and even by the end of the film, even though the film sort of establishes who was who by the end, by the film's very nature of its unreliable narrator, we can't really be sure of that. We can't really be sure any one character looks the way we think they look. So yeah, I was wondering if
I think you might
they
be right,
literally cast the
shout.
same person, and it was like he was trying to relive that father-daughter relationship. And I thought another thing that kind of slightly confused me timeline-wise was the whole thing with Paris. She mentions Paris at the beginning, and it's clearly something he's remembered, that he's transplanted into a later or earlier memory. He's like talking about it. He can't quite put it down, like when that character says that thing. And then Anne has her husband Paul, and I'm confused about where the timeline works, because I'm sure her old husband was like James or something, and she split up with him 5 years ago. But then she's got another husband. So is that the other sister's husband? I'm confused as to what's being transplanted, because there's like this gap.
What's the name of the doctor again? Because is it not the case that he's just mixing up? Because obviously most of the film is kind of implied to be remembered, as you said early on, remembered sort of unreliably by Anthony Hopkins while he's in this hospital ward. It's never really clear whether this is actually shown to be a sequence of events that's ever actually happened, right?
Yeah.
So I forget the name of the doctor. Is it not just the case, because we know he mixes up the doctor with the Anne's husband? Carer. Is his name? Oh yes, him. Yeah. So if the doctor's name, the problem is I actually haven't watched this as recently as you. Maybe you might be right.
I don't think his name was Paul.
Okay, maybe you're right. I can't argue either way.
There are. I mean, it's hard to criticize the film for being slightly confusing, because its very nature is that. But that was the one thing that kind of I never felt like was even really attempted to be resolved by the film. Like, where did the Paris thing? How could he remember someone saying Paris at the beginning, but then be talking to people? If that was the old relationship with the husband, then Paris wouldn't be brought up for years, so it doesn't really work in that situation. And then he'd have had to have been, remembering this over the course of years instead of the course of weeks and months. So it all was confusing, unless he's misremembering which sister it is. Which I guess is
fully possible, right?
Like, maybe that's happening. Maybe Anne is being remembered as the caring one across all of it. And he's kind of forgetting more and more of his older sister, the other sister, the other daughter. Maybe, should I have looked into it beforehand to clarify? Maybe. But you know what? The point is, on first watch, it was confusing, and if I'm to hold anything against the film, I would say that, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a fail. So I mean, just to sort of, this film is great. I recommend. I don't know if I can recommend it to everyone. I think if you have like a really personal experience with this, that
it might be a bit difficult.
Yeah, I probably just wouldn't. I would say just don't watch it, to be honest.
It might just bring back some
because it is just quite grim in a lot of ways. But it is, if you feel like you can handle it, or if you just want to watch a really, really powerful drama, this is about as good as Oscar ones get. And if you like Anthony Hopkins, this is a no-brainer. If you like Olivia Coleman, this is a no-brainer. I think this is a pretty stunning directorial debut, actually. Really,
that's got to be lauded.
Really,
for sure.
Really interested to see what this guy does next.
Well, he's got one in the works called The Sun, I think. So
maybe this is going to be the new cinematic universe. I don't know.
Just the family, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's an 8 out of 10. It's the kind of thing I could see bumping up to a 9 on a rewatch. Some of those details that you were raising regarding that the first daughter storyline that we were talking about could potentially sort of click with me a bit more this time around. Great film. What would you give it?
I'm with you. 8 out of 10. I think the thing that, I mean, as you say, I imagine it to be a film that I could enjoy more and more with future watches. And the thing that really cemented the quality of this film for me was, earlier I was mentioning the sort of stages of grief or acceptance where he's trying to process his way through it, and there's like a moment where he gets slapped by Paul. And he breaks down like a child, and suddenly his emotion like really quickly shifts from anger, confusion, frustration to just fear and panic and sadness and just this lack of control. He's not crying because he's frustrated anymore. He's crying because like he just doesn't know his own mind anymore. He doesn't know the world anymore. He's confused. He's not even angry that he's been slapped. He's just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Who are you? Like, what's... And that mirrors at the end. Like, he goes through a similar thing. He almost regresses to a childlike state where he's like, I'm just scared. I'm just frightened. And this is life for me now. This is just every waking moment. Like, is just... It's hell. It's hellish. And it really is... a horrible realization for the audience, particularly if you've never had an experience with this kind of thing before, to really sort of a window into just one of the most sort of awful, debilitating conditions you could ever end up in. So yeah, man, a wonderful film and a very powerful insight into a really difficult topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely deserved of all the praise it received.
Absolutely.
I recommend it in general. Not an easy watch, but I think this is a real thing that happens. So I think it's an important thing.
I'd say
I'm honestly surprised you don't get more films about this kind of stuff.
This is like a daytime viewing film, if you ask me. You watch it in the day. You process how fucking sad you are.
Yeah, I went to bed after watching this, and it was a bit rough. I was like lying in bed, like fucking hell, man.
So you got to watch something like afterwards. Like I think I watched this the other day, and then I watched like the footy, and I was like, oh, okay, easy.
You need some like I don't know, lo-fi hip hop beats to relax to after this for sure. You need something. You need to like watch some anime. I don't know, pick yourself back up because this is not a fun time for the whole family, but a very very fucking good film. If you just want a fucking good film, this will scratch your itch 100%. So, the second film we watched was 1962's Harakiri /Seppuku. It's actually called in Japan. Directed by the legendary Masaaki Kobayashi, one of the all-time greats of the classic sort of Japan boom in cinema. Obviously, I think this guy kind of gets overshadowed by Kurosawa a fair bit. This film is actually, I forget the name of the guy who wrote it precisely, but he's a bit of a legendary screenwriter, and he wrote lots of Akira Kurosawa stuff. So bit of a Japanese classic. This is one of the I think it's a little underlooked in a lot of ways. I don't think this is as popular as it's obviously nowhere near like Seven Samurai or something,
right?
But as samurai films go, this is an absolute classic, like a must watch. I remember watching this a while back, and I've been really really keen to rewatch it because I think it's an absolute banger. I'll just quickly describe it. So it's about a ronin, which is a sort of masterless samurai, who shows up to perform harakiri at I think it's the E clan's
the EO
temper.
I
think it's EYI. Sorry, IYI.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. He shows up at their temple to perform harakiri, which is for the uninitiated, disemboweling yourself as a ritual of honor. For as a better end than dying an impoverished samurai, basically, and a lot of things unfurl beyond this. What did you think of Harakiri, Adam?
Well, I went into this knowing absolutely nothing about it.
That's the way to go, man.
And
this one,
if you sell it to me like, oh, it's a classic samurai film, my initial thoughts were, oh, it's going to be a Seven Samurai type thing. It's going to be, a lot of action, a lot of kind of, impressive set pieces and things like that. And instead, what I got was a very quiet, slow-paced, tense,
more of a thriller, really, isn't it?
Wonderfully told drama. I loved it, honestly. I really gelled with it, and I love the pacing of it because it is very slowly and carefully paced, and that might put some people off, but it kind of, the way it draws you, it kind of draws you to a conclusion that you know you're heading towards, and yet the more you get there, the more you're kind of like anxiously awaiting that conclusion. It's really masterful in the way that it uses its pace and its structure to kind of eke as much of that feeling out of you as possible. The performances are wonderful. I really like the guy that plays Sugamo.
He is a legendary actor.
Yeah,
he's an absolute. I think he's actually dead now, but he was just like he's in a series of films again directed by Masaki Kobayashi, The Human Condition. He is an unbelievably good actor, and I think he is. Yeah, he is the reason to watch this film in a way.
Oh, he's so good. I really like the guy that plays the head of the EE house.
Yes.
He's great as well. Just this like really callous, uncaring villain that definitely at points you can see like the fear in him, particularly at the end. But like as more and more draws out, because it's not just about what the storytelling of it draws out of the audience, but what it draws out of the villain as well. Like the more he realizes he's made like a mistake, and the more he gets like dug in to like his conviction, and he's like, well, to admit I was wrong is weakness, and I will never do that. And so, you know, he never even seems to consider that, but you can see it in him. You can see that he's being affected by the story and like, you know, the consequences of what he has wrought. It's hard to talk, again, another film that's hard to talk about without getting into spoilers. So
should we just talk about all the sort of peripherals before we get into the meat of the story? So the reason, so this film, I said earlier to you, Adam, that this was going to be difficult to compare to The Father, but it's actually not. This film also does feel very stage playish in a way. You can see there being an absolutely great stage play of this film, because it is sort of a bottle film as well. You are in one location for much of this film, and it's very character driven, very dialogue driven, for the most part. And I think the absolute beauty of this film comes down to two basic sort of filmmaking principles. The one is just that the editing, I think, is basically like mathematically perfect. I don't think there is like a bad edit in the film in terms of like dramatic pause, cutting to like a close up, cutting to like a wide shot. Each like zoom is like perfectly in sync with what is like narratively going on. There's like nothing lost in translation in the editing. I think it is maybe one of the best edited films I've ever seen. It knows when to like linger. I just think it's basically perfect on that front. The other thing that it nails is, you're right, there is a point in the film where you're basically like, this is ending one way, and I know what it is basically, but it has a perfect amount of build up of tension and then release of a new bit of information that makes you go, oh
yeah. It's fantastic at that. There's things that you're thinking about beforehand, and then you kind of get distracted away from, and then oh shit, I forgot about that. Yes, back to that. Yeah. And
like, it's also a film that relies very heavily on flashbacks, which normally for me is like really quite annoying for a lot of film, because you have to, if you're going to do extensive flashbacks, you have to kind of stop the main narrative of the film and drop back to this other thing that's happened before, and it can really fuck with the pacing. Yes. But they kind of pull it off perfectly, so that it's timed. That you'll get really long extended flashback sequences, and you're just in it. You're never thinking like, oh, I can't. This is dragging. I want to get back to this bit. For me personally, so I don't know if
I agree. Yeah. I mean, having learnt a bit of creative writing at university, I was always told, flashbacks are kind of a bit of a writing sin unless you kind of build your writing around a flashback or around flashbacks as like a continued theme through the work. I mean, that's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, but here I think that really the flashback is built into it as like a fundamental like building block. Like with it can only exist in that format really, and that kind of the understanding that you're given, that you kind of, it's alluded to, and so I think the way it works is that there's tension in both, and that's the key part. It's not that, you know, a character is telling a story, they stop telling the story, and now you're bored because you're waiting for them to tell the story again. It's the reveal of the reaction to the story has tension within it as well. You know, like the weight of their the what's the word? The consequence. You know, that appears on these characters' faces is just genius. Yeah,
it's kind of, I love the meta element of this film. Thematically, it really plays into this as well, which we'll get into that. But we kind of need to go into the story to sort of talk about it, because I think thematically this film's really strong.
Yeah.
I love the kind of meta element of this film in that it's kind of like, it's essentially it's another kind of film about films in a way, because it's about a guy showing up and telling a story, and he's telling a story to prove a point to these people.
Yeah.
And you know, the audience, you know, that being these very traditional samurai who are absolutely devoted to this way of the system of living that the film is clearly despises. This is one of the most like politically scathing films I've ever watched, and you really wouldn't expect going into like a samurai film to get that, which I think
not at all.
Which is just amazing. I don't know how this plays into the context of Japan. I do know like Japan is like a very conservative place. You know, and I've heard like, you know, left-wing people in Japan basically refer to it as like a fascist ethno-state in a lot of ways in terms of the attitude of people there. And there are, you know, there's like, you know, fascism has like a really deep root in Japan. You know, after World War One, you know, it was like, you know, one of the defining elements of the national psyche in a similar, and in a way that doesn't really get talked about a lot. And this film, I think, has to be about that. I don't think there's any other way to really interpret it.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of it in those terms. Yeah, but
and the film is it's basically about using storytelling to point this out to people and the reaction it gets, and it's like a lot of Kobayashi films, does not really have a particularly great outlook on that. It's
very nihilistic, nihilistic.
Yes.
That's a really interesting point actually about how meta it was. I really hadn't considered how it was like a film within a film, like having storytellers within a film.
Yeah.
I guess inherently is, you know, if it's well executed, inherently does comment on the form itself. I guess the one thing I want to talk about before we break into spoilers, because we're heading, so we're so close to that line.
I know.
Just briefly, the music I thought was really, really cool.
Oh, I love the music, man.
So
the opening bit is so cool.
Yeah. I love that it's played on these really sort of jangly, earthy instruments. Like they're not as clean or as, you know, melodic as like a guitar, or like it's all acoustic, but it's very traditional Japanese instrumentation. And it's a lot of it kind of comes through almost kind of percussive playing style and like emotive, the emotions gained through that.
I am shocked you don't know what instrument it is. I would have thought you would have shown it to your dad or something to get the answer.
No, I'm not very good with Japanese instruments. You know, I know what like a balalaika is and stuff, but I think that's Russian and stuff. I'm not that great with my instruments.
Are you sure your dad's probably got one kicking around of whatever?
Maybe I just have a look around. Yeah. No, but basically the point of it is like it's a very unusual, particularly for a Western audience, style of scoring a piece. It's way less dramatic or way less melodramatic, I would say, than having a traditional orchestra that we would so often have in like a Hollywood film.
It sounds quite folky in a way, but also absolutely lays down the right tone. It's like very sinister, and I think it's used like the perfect amount. Like it would never. There's like barely any music in the film at all, but because you know it's good music because the fact that you've commented on it, despite how little of it there is in the film.
Yeah. You know? Well, I think that's part of it as well. That when it comes in, it's really distinctive. Not only does it sound very different to what I'm used to hearing, it punctuates scenes in a very sort of dramatic and poignant manner. It's like if there's a reaction, there's a sting of music, and it's really you know, I don't know, it's used very expressively and in a way that's rarely used in Western cinema. You know, we usually accompany a scene, but you know what, probably weirdly most similarly in horror films would we see that kind of expressive music, but this music isn't horrifying, it's just quite sort of, it's like guttural.
Well,
like, it's really like kind of clattering and like dramatic, and yeah, it's just really powerful.
It's funny you mention horror films though, because this Masaki Kobayashi did make an anthology horror film. It's that? Probably Kwaidan. It's
Kwaidan.
It's like it's like 5 short stories mashed into one, and that's like he's a master of sound design as well as music. Clearly, if you watch that film, that's got some really. There's a lot of stuff in that. That film is all sort of Japanese folk horror stories, sort of just adapted and put together. It's a great film.
I've heard that's actually supposed to be really fucking scary as well.
It's
like really
because
powerful.
What's interesting about it is you can kind of, it is a kind of the first story in the film is literally like the J horror boom template. It's like a proto Ring story, which is really interesting. Yeah, it really is.
Cool.
In one, I won't spoil it at all, but there's like one specific thing that happens in it that is like, you're kind of like, wow, is that like really that old? Because those are all very old stories, and that's got some great music in it. And there's I think the third one is like this kind of it's like the longest portion of the film is very musically focused. And there's actually a scene in this film with the wedding where he's doing that classic Japanese singing style, which sounds as a non Japanese person, it's very sort of strange to hear that sort of style of singing. It's just not really something that I hear. You know what they're doing with like the vowels, you know, and the singing and the way they sort of express it. It's like it's very different, and to me, and it really that's another thing that pops up in that film. I think he's in terms as a director, I think using music and sound design, he's kind of a master, because there are like long stretches of this film that are just like silent as well. Like a particularly climactic scene is like all it is, it's just ambient noise and like the sounds of like, you know, this didn't really spoil it, like there's obviously sword fighting in it, of the swords just clicking together, and just like the long breaks of silence, and then like the swords, you know, hitting each other. It's like a very visceral effect that he gets with that. I just think it's basically a masterclass.
Yeah. I mean, I guess now is the time we finally do it. We finally break into spoilers.
Yeah, so the film is called Harakiri. So the first reveal that we get is basically that this temple has been having trouble with samurai showing up, saying they're going to perform Harakiri, but are only really in it for a few days of free food and water, and then they bounce. And they think it's dishonourable, and you know they're being fucked over, and they don't like it. So the next guy who comes to perform Harakiri, they kind of prank him, basically, in the cruelest way possible. And basically, what happens is they're like, well, you know, you're going to perform Harakiri, so you're going to do it like right now. We think you're so honourable. It's amazing you're doing this. He begs for like a day of reprieve, and. You know, he is immediately trying to back out of it, and in the end they're like, no, you know, you've got to do this now. They find out that his swords are not real samurai swords; they're made of bamboo. And it essentially gets to the point where they're saying, look, you're gonna have to do this. You can't leave. So stab yourself with these bamboo samurai swords. You know, because we're gonna kill you anyways. You should at least go out with honor. And he, in a horribly gruesome scene, does it, but it
takes several attempts because his sword's obviously completely blunt, so he's stabbing himself with just like slightly sharp bamboo. It's fucking so like brutal, completely
so brutal. And you know, there's with violence in a lot of these older films, it can be quite difficult to pull off convincingly. And I think this film does maybe have a few moments where it's not 100% convincing, but in this particular scene, the titular scene, I think it's done absolutely perfectly. It's like quite difficult to watch, and quite visceral as an experience.
I think what I really enjoyed about the opening is, again, I guess similarly to my experience with Father, is that I was kind of led down one avenue, or like I thought, oh, my understanding of the film is this, and then it kind of swerved me. This so much more than Father, where the way that early on you get the majority of it comes from the temple's perspective, the House of E, and they're like, yeah, we absolutely, rused this guy. He was trying to like get money from us. He was trying to challenge our honor. What he was doing was deeply, deeply dishonorable.
Oh yeah, I should mention that they're telling this to our main character.
Yes, so
as a warning.
So Sugamo and the guy that had to perform Harakiri with his bamboo was called Chijume. What was it?
Isn't it Tom? Is Chijawa? Isn't it like Tomone or something?
Sorry, let me just... Oh, Chijiwa. So yeah, Chijiwa was the original guy that had to commit Harakiri. And so from the perspective of the house, it looks, like they, did the honourable thing. Well, not necessarily in an honourable way, but I was kind of watching it like, wow, they've totally one-upped this guy. That's like kind of... It's kind of fun, but really brutal, and there's like an element of satisfaction there because it's like this guy trying to swindle them got what they wanted. And then Sugamo comes in and is like, your understanding of this situation is completely fucking wrong.
Yeah.
And then you re-understand, you recontextualize this inciting incident and the reasons it's happened, and it's like completely flips everything, and it's amazing.
Yes. I think that is the amazing magic trick this film pulls, is like just completely recontextualizing that opening scene, that opening sequence, I should say. It's just like, yeah, you kind of watch it and you're like, wow, that's pretty fucked up. But ultimately, this guy comes through and he looks completely weak, weak-willed and kind of pathetic, and he looks like he's been, essentially completely bested. And then, Sugomo, he then sort of, you get there's a thing throughout the film which we'll come back to where he's talking about how during the practice of Harakiri, once you performed it, you have a second who is a guy with a sword who chops your head off after you've disemboweled yourself, which seems nice. And he requests 3 swordsmen, and as they each go, as they send off messengers, they all appear to be ill. So in the meantime, he tells his story, and he starts talking. He goes into his backstory regarding his kind of like adopted family in a way. The practice of Harakiri comes back into it. So it turns out like one of his friends had to perform Harakiri. It's essentially like a political ploy to help his lord's own Harakiri, because he needed like a spirit to follow him, right?
Yes. Basically, the house that they were samurais for fell in some kind of political struggle. Like, it was basically decided that this house was no longer necessary, and so it was just dissolved, and it led to the dissolution of all these lives that were intertwined with the house. And so like, out of honor, the leader of the house has to kill himself, but to stop Sugamo doing it himself, his friend does it, and is like, I request of you, please do not commit Harakiri. You have to look after my son. Well, not look after him, but like make sure he gets a good life, and don't lead him down, keep him away from like a dark path, essentially. His
son and his daughter, I think she's like an adopted daughter though, right? It's not actually his biological daughter. Am I wrong?
I don't know.
I think there's some dialogue early on. I could be wrong. Can't remember exactly. But
I thought that was his actual daughter.
You might be right. But no, I think maybe you are right, actually. I can't remember. There was a bit of dialogue earlier on in the film that was making me think that it wasn't. But regardless, essentially, he sort of follows on like a fair few years after. They both get married to one another. He essentially is kind of has to arrange this marriage so that she doesn't end up becoming a concubine for another house, because that sounds a bit fucking grim. And already you're getting a lot of themes regarding capitalism coming in terms of like the guy comes in to propose this and is like, you've got to think about her. Do you think she likes living in this sort of squalid poverty? Like you should just marry her off. It's not the worst thing to be a concubine.
Right.
And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's fucked up.
Yeah, you have to sell your principles in order to get ahead in the world, right? It's that kind of notion.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, well, this is your one option out, and it's obviously not a very fair option. But he gets around it. They both get married. They have a very cute baby, and things go pretty wrong. Basically,
when you say they both get married, it should be clarified that was it?
Oh, not him and his daughter. Sorry.
Yeah, Chijiwa.
Motome
he marries off the
Miho.
Yeah.
Sorry, he doesn't marry his daughter. So sorry, he marries his daughter off to his friend's son. Yeah, and they have a cute baby, and then basically there's like a horrible winter. Everyone becomes horribly impoverished. And essentially, both Miho and Kingo, the baby, become horribly sick, and all this transpires. And essentially, it turns out in the end that Motome went out under the illusion of borrowing, under the pretension, of borrowing money, and instead went off to do the scheme that was referenced very early on in the film, to try and just get some money to pay for a doctor, because they just can't afford a doctor to see the baby. And that completely recontextualizes that opening scene and shows you just how just fucking cruel the what they did was, in like a completely fucked up way. And then not only that, the three guys show up with his horribly mutilated body and drop it off in their house in a kind of mocking way. With
they're really like callous about it. And they didn't actually perform the second on him, which is supposed to be the path of the honorable samurai, is that you're supposed to be beheaded as like a guarantee of your reprieve, passing onto whatever lies beyond. And they didn't do that. He's head is still attached.
He bit his whole tongue out, right? That's what they say. He like couldn't kill himself with the bamboo swords. He had to like bite his tongue and like choke himself essentially.
Oh, I see. I remember them mentioning that, and I didn't 100% gather that, but okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So and thus springs the main character's revenge plot essentially in sort of pranking them back in a way. But that actually culminates in maybe my favourite part of the film, one of the like most heartbreaking parts of the film, which is the bit where when they drop the bamboo swords and they leave, he says to himself basically, and I think this is his name is I haven't mentioned his name. Tatsuya Nakadai is the actor. He has a sort of little short, not really a monologue, but just a scene with basically just him, where he realizes like, oh wow, Motome sold his swords. Like it never even crossed my mind. Like why didn't I sell my sword? Like it was too dear to me. It never even entered my mind that I should just sell this fucking sword that I don't even need. It's literally just a symbol of like some pointless tradition, right? I should have just sold this sword, and I never even thought to do that. And that is just, I don't know, that bit always hits me. Of the two times I've watched it, that is like, and that sucks, because then he just says, basically the baby died 3 days afterwards, and then she died 3 days after that. Yeah. So it's pretty brutal as a setup goes, and you're only getting like the full setup halfway through the film, and that's why I love the escalating tension as well. It's just
I mean, I think what's brilliant. Going. I mean, that is brilliant, and what is brilliant about it is, coming back to what you were saying before we were in spoilers about the kind of the message of the film, is that it basically, I mean, under a more modern context, but it kind of pokes and interrogates this notion that is so kind of synonymous with Japanese culture, at least for an outsider, of honor, As you know, like even now, you know, honor comes above so many other things, and you know, holding the era of samurai and the feudal Japan in such high regard. It's like, look what we once were. Look at these honorable traditions and these fearsome warriors that we used to be. And this film goes, that's all bullshit. Everything that you believed in was the antithesis of like what it really means to be a human being.
Yes,
you know, you are sacrificing so much of your humanity to uphold these traditions, when ultimately what you did killed 3 people, and you know, not helping anyone else in the town, even though you have immense wealth, and just sort of isolating yourself could have killed, you know, many more. You know, like the being so you know, having all this power and doing nothing with it. I guess that's more extrapolated. You could extrapolate more of that yourself. That's not so explicitly mentioned by the film, but
no, I think you're completely right. It's like the ultimate anti-samurai film, while being one of the best samurai films. It's kind of like those sort of neo-westerns, which is sort of go into the, obviously Western films, samurai films are very similar in a lot of regards.
Yeah, I was going to say this had a kind of very Western flavour to it.
Yeah, it does, right? So it is. Yeah, the concept of the film is, the film obviously has to revel a little bit in how cool samurai stuff looks, because at the end of the day it just is quite cool and aesthetically pleasing. But I don't think it has it both ways. It is completely brutal and like scathing in basically just pointing out that complete and just like unthinking adherence to tradition is just used by like powerful institutions to just like maintain like hierarchies of power and remove empathy towards, you know, anyone who might stand to gain just a little bit of, you know, wealth from them. It's like it's completely, it shows just how like callous that kind of culture is, and like that kind of conservative, completely traditionally minded, and essentially sort of like backwards and just like very like old and traditional style of thinking is like just pointless and only leads to like the suffering of most people. And I love the scene where he's essentially like calling it out to them, and he's like sat there and he's like laughing at them. And he's like, you talk about samurai honor, like I don't know what it is. And then I think my favourite bit in the film happens. I think it's like maybe the most fucking gangster moment of the film. You mean. Yeah. So at this point, you know, the seconds that he has requested have not shown up, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I know they're not going to show up. Don't worry, I didn't kill them." And he like takes out their samurai top knots out of his sort of jacket, samurai robes one at a time, and just kind of chucks them on the floor and explains and you get like a series of flashbacks going into detail about how he would just like went out and absolutely went beast mode on these guys, and it's fucking sick.
It's so good. Yeah. He's like, I've got some of your property to return, and he just chucks their top knots. And to clarify for those not in the know, the top knot is like a real symbol of again of honor in with samurais. Like the kind of like the longer your top knot, the like more fearsome of a warrior you are, kind of thing, right?
So he's essentially like honor castrated them.
He makes a comment like, I didn't behead him, but I may as well have. And later on, the one of the what's the guy that runs the house called? Like, does he have a title? Well, basically, our main bad guy in charge of all of it, his messenger comes back, and he's like, "Oh, you know, I've discovered all this has happened." He's like, "You're an idiot. Like, I know all this already." And then the message is like, "Yeah, but one of them's committed hara-kiri already," and he's like, "Good. The other 2 need to do it as well. Like, we can't accept that." So like taking their top knots was a life sentence, but again, a comment on how they can't live without their honor code. Like, they're so dug in to this mentality that they would take their lives rather than admit that they had been bested in battle. Essentially, like, to be bested is to be killed. and that's just wild, right? I mean, especially to outsiders, like it's an incredibly, jarring concept to get your head around.
What did you think about like the end sequence in general?
I have mixed feelings on it, although our conversation has kind of changed my opinion on it slightly. I think I've got a better understanding for it. But okay. I would like to just talk about the final fight scene he has with the third swordsman.
Yeah. That was what I was referencing earlier in terms of sound design, by the way.
Oh yeah. That's maybe one of the only moments where we go outside from all of these like very, claustrophobic interior spaces. We're out in these fields. We sort of like go through the woods, and we're out in these like this long grass. And
it's so gorgeous, man.
It's very ghostly. Like I felt like it felt ethereal and like haunted in like a really powerful way. It's hard to kind of describe, but all the sound design, the music that kind of opens it up, it has this real spiritual quality, I guess. And yeah, there's something really powerful and dramatic about the way they set up the fight. And then the fight itself is kind of not really shown particularly. It's shown in a couple of moments, but they don't really go into it. And I guess that's kind of the point of the film is, there's not really much, samurai fighting in it. And then when we do get to our climactic fight at the end, where he tries to take on everyone, which we kind of saw coming, and it was still really satisfying to get to, they kind of fight badly. They fight. they don't fight well, and that was a problem with me before we started talking about it. And the more we've discussed this, the more I kind of frame it as this critical view of samurais in general, and it makes more sense because like he's not a brilliant swordsman, but the point is he is the only swordsman there that's ever fought. Everything else is ceremony. Everything is all about to be seen as a samurai, but not to actually be one. And he is the only one there that can call himself a samurai.
Yeah, because he talks about how he's seen battle at like some siege, and you just look at these guys in the palace, and like this is just costumes.
They are just but playing dress up. Yeah, that's all that it is. And so the notion of him besting, a 2 or 3 dozen samurai suddenly doesn't seem so ridiculous because of the way it frames it. And the choreography of it is kind of sloppy and almost silly, but that kind of makes sense the more I think about it. I guess initially I was like, you're building to this is your kind of climax, why is it so kind of rickety? But no, it makes perfect sense now. Like
I think I see what you mean. It is that there is like a sort of amateurishness to how it's shot, which like you're kind of thinking like it's very stop-start, and it's very sort of in bursts, and you're kind of thinking like, why are they not all just attacking him at once? But it does kind of make sense narratively. It would probably be my only real problem. I think the film is basically perfect outside of that final sequence, and I still actually like the final sequence. I don't think it's bad or anything.
And it has a great conclusion to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say what it builds to is absolutely perfect, and the way it's like choreographed in terms of like you get a very clear geography, and the way he's going through the different rooms is very clearly set up, and then it leads to like the perfect ending. I do think it kind of makes sense, and it kind of goes to show you how cowardly they are, because he explicitly calls them cowards, and they're all clearly scared of him. So it does kind of make sense in a way that they're kind of just like stood there like waiting for him to do something, so they can try and get a slash at him, because they know like even if he's got his back turned to them, this guy actually knows how to fight with a sword. He will turn around and probably fuck you. So in a way, it does kind of make sense.
Yeah, it does. And I really like how, the fight, the way that it all ends is great, but there seems to be a turning point in his battle where he kind of realizes that, he's getting more and more wounded, and he starts not seeming to care as much about injuring more people, but destroying as much of the house as he can. Of like, causing as much damage, not just to the building, but to the kind of the heritage and the notion of samurai culture. And that culminates in him going to this sort of sacred samurai
it's like a decorative armor piece, which is
which
also like the opening shot of the film, and they are shown praying to it as well at one point.
I think it's supposed to be armor sort of dressed up to, and it has like hair coming out of it and like facial hair coming out of like the mask, and it looks like it's supposed to be like a deity or like some a samurai of long ago that they kind of look to and admire and worship. I'm not 100% on the historical nature of samurai and Japanese religion and spirituality, but that's kind of the gist, and the point of it is that he takes that statue, that armor, and just throws it on the floor.
Well, he uses it as a meat shield as well for a bit, and they're all too scared to like go up and attack it, and then as a final moment, they're too scared. They kind of like gasp as he like picks it up and is like, it kind of looks like he's going to try and like get his way out. Essentially, he's like using it as like a hostage. But then a bunch of people show up with some rifles, like old school sort of musket style rifles, and shoot at the armor which he's holding and killing him. The ultimate fuck you of the film is that in the end you have them writing in the notebook that they write in earlier, where they just say, what we're going to record is this guy showed up, honorably did his hara-kiri, and all these other guys who he had top knotted, they committed hara-kiri, nothing of importance happened, and ultimately they win, even though he actually got them to completely prove that he showed that even they don't actually care about tradition in any meaningful way, because in the end of the day,
they just
he forced them to shoot on their most sacred thing, right?
Yeah, true, yeah.
So like he completely proves his point to them, but the ultimate fuck you of the film, the kind of like nihilistic dark ending, is that at the end of the day they won, and they can write the history as they want, and no one's ever going to know.
History. Yeah, exactly that. And it is also important to note that as he's dying, he commits hara-kiri himself. So
of course,
he does kind of get the fuck you back on them, like, you're not going to take me out of this world, I'm going to do it, like this is my stand, and it ends on my terms.
It's very Western. It's fucking awesome.
It's great. It's fantastic. So Rupert, what would you rate hara-kiri?
I think hara-kiri is I think it's I think it's basically like it's got everything that makes for a truly great film. It's got the emotional impact. It's absolutely beautifully shot. Some of the best black and white photography I've ever seen. Real sense of atmosphere. Astonishing performances across the board. Some like fantastic dialogue. The plotting is perfect. The editing is great. There is like maybe a few minor like niggles that I have with with some of the action. It's maybe a little dated. Really, I actually quite like the fight, the individual action scenes he has with each of the swordsmen. They're not really like action, but I think they're perfectly fine and like dramatically tense. The last one maybe has like a few dated elements to it. It doesn't bother me too much, but it's my only real criticism of the film. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. I recommend it to pretty much anyone if you've got any interest in Japanese films. If you want like maybe a good film to start with Japanese films, I actually think this is not a bad one, because I think it's I think it's very entertaining, and if you're kind of into that historical element of it, it seems very authentic as well. There's a lot of great costumes. It's very interesting. I feel like Seven Samurai might be like a more entertaining story, but if you want to know about samurai and like kind of get a feel for what the thing is, like what samurai are or what they were, and kind of what they meant, this is the best place to start for samurai films, because it really lays the groundwork, but not uncritically. And I think there's a lot of like really powerful and important themes in this film that feel completely relevant and completely poignant in this film. I think it's 9 out of 10.
Damn. I mean, I don't think I can surmise it any better than you did. On my first watch, I think this is an 8 out of 10. I could totally see it growing, to be honest. And I think, discussing this the way we have has kind of opened my eyes to some of the other qualities of this film that perhaps I wasn't quite as aware of, or more not so much aware of how deep they go. Some of the criticisms and commentary that this actually does delve into. As you say, it is absolutely beautiful. The acting is impeccable. I love what's the guy's name?
Tatsuya Nakadai.
Nakadai, yes, yeah. He's amazing. It's just a really compassionate, emotive piece, and completely one of the only samurai films I've really seen. Like I've seen maybe a handful, and probably a lot of them would probably maybe have been a bit newer. This is like one of the classics of the genre, and yet completely deconstruct it, and I think that's genius. I love stuff like that. Kind of in a similar ballpark. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's like both kind of definitive of the sci-fi genre and completely deconstructs what it means to be a sci-fi film.
Yeah,
at the
that's
same
a good
time.
comparison.
Yeah, it's a really transformative bit of work, and I'm pretty mesmerized by it. And I have to say, I think we've done pretty well this week, Rupert. This has been one of the best, highest quality weeks of film that we've watched in a little while.
I'm trying to
think
of
chaos walkings this time.
I'm trying to think of like a duo we've done that's been of similar quality, but yeah, I'm coming up pretty short. I mean, what did we review with I'm Thinking of Ending Things?
Oh, Dracula.
Oh, okay. Well, that's close, obviously.
And I'm still not as sold on I'm Thinking of Ending Things as well. It's not as unanimous.
Yeah, true.
Again, I should really rewatch that film.
I would say, as a final note on this one, if you enjoyed this, the next thing you should watch is a film by the same director, Samurai Rebellion. Very similar in theme. Probably not quite as good as Harakiri, but very, very close to being as good. An equally sort of deconstructive and sort of tragic samurai story. If you're ever you've got an itch that only a samurai film can scratch, that is probably a slightly more traditional samurai film, but with that level of quality. So that is quite a difficult film to get hold of, though, granted, but it's very, very fucking good. And just as another side note, this film was actually remade by the one and only Takashi Miike.
Was it?
Who apparently, the entire flashback that we talked about in this film that's kind of divvied up very masterfully is dropped in like one entire long sequence. And apparently it's fucking terrible. So
okay, well.
Although I imagine the action is completely ridiculous in it, so I'm kind of tempted to watch it anyways.
Even the best directors can't have all hits. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're really passionate about like an old piece of film, you've got like these like, oh, if I could do it, I'd do it this this specifically different way. Sometimes the original is a masterpiece and you can't really fuck with it. And just even because if you're trying to tweak the whole form of the film, then you have limited ways to go with it. So if how that ended up, then.
I just looked it up. It was remade to be a 3D film. So.
Oh my god!
I can't think of a less appropriate way to do it than James Cameroning it. But wow, okay.
That's baffling. That really is.
It's on Prime, so that might have to get watched at some point. Right, Adam, what is the film?
I've just realised that I forgot to pick a new film, so I'm desperately scrolling through Netflix right now, trying to get some ideas.
I mean, I'm trying to think, how can I point you? I mean, do you want to continue the Asian cinema spree, or do you want to break onto something different?
I'm tempted to continue the spree. I am tempted.
Don't feel pressured either way. I mean, I'm
actually,
happy
you know
with whatever.
what? I was talking to my family about Korean cinema earlier. We've gone Chinese cinema. We've done Japanese cinema. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't now go to Korean cinema.
True, we haven't done a Korean film, and we love Korean films.
I don't think we have done one on here, have we? Or at least,
we've talked about them a lot, but we don't think we've actually done one. Yeah.
What do I pick though?
There's a few. I mean, you could go with a Bong Joon-ho one. You've seen plenty of those. You could do
I'm
what's his name?
to do something.
Park Chan-wook or something.
Chan-wook.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to do something I've not seen because I something I quite like about doing these podcasts and forcing myself to see new stuff and you know that excitement of the discovery. I'm thinking I need to watch The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook.
That is amazing. Yeah.
And I really want to watch. What Bong Joon-ho films have I not seen? I never finished The Host. I really want to watch Lady Vengeance as well. That's Chan-wook, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's I mean, these are all great films, so I'm kind of happy with whatever you pick.
Have you seen Lady Vengeance?
Yeah, Lady Vengeance is good. Yeah.
Because that's part of the trilogy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the... And you've seen Mr. Vengeance.
I've seen Mr. Vengeance.
Mr. Vengeance, which I think actually might be better, but is actually like considered
That's so
worse.
good. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Fuck. Ooh. I want to flip a coin, but I don't have any coins on me. Fuck.
Not even one of your Pokemon card coins.
I actually do have one of those. Don't even, oh, fuck's sake.
How did I know?
I have them because I've been... Look, I'm a nerd and I've been opening Pokemon cards. Leave me alone. Okay. Alright, we're watching Lady Vengeance.
Banging. I am very excited for that. So yeah, if you want to be caught up for the next podcast, look up Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, directed by Park Chan-wook. I think the third installment in the sort of unofficial trilogy.
It's the sort of Vengeance trilogy. It's a loosely established trilogy. They're not like joined by story, but more by like themes.
Just title,
right?
Yeah. That's a great pick. It is a sort of violent Korean film, so you can expect some themes of revenge and really, really excessive revenge to come up a fair amount. So looking forward to rewatching that.
Awesome.
I've enjoyed this. I think you should try and get... I would love to watch Harakiri with someone who's never watched it before, because it's got all those plot reveals. I think it'd be quite good. It'd be quite good to watch with a family or something. If you can get your your family to sit through a Park Chan-wook film, I'll be deeply impressed. But
I got them to sit through Cure when we.
Well, that's true. That's a pretty esoteric one.
They were very. They didn't hate it. I mean, that's the victory in of itself. They were deeply intrigued by it. I don't think they loved it in the same way I did, but
that's a hard.
You got to take your chances. You know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah, and Korean cinema is the hip new thing, so maybe it'll click. Who knows? Anyways, watch Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, directed by Park Chan-wook, starring a whole bunch of people, and we will catch you next time on the next podcast. Coming soon, I hope. Right. If you've made it this far, subscribe to the fucking channel.
Oh yeah,
For God's
like
sake.
and all that stuff. And Spotify, follow Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. Sorry, do the 5 stars. And we will catch you next time. And we look forward to it.
Yes, we do.
It is always a pleasure. So yeah,
it has been a pleasure. Peace.